Hello, welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism, this is a continuation, this video, of this book, America's Secret Establishment, an introduction to the Order of the Skull and Bones, Antony Sutton. Antony Sutton is a recognized author. I don't think anybody would ever say he's fabricating this information. He's published quite a few books. So he's a smarter guy than me. But I read the books and I report. And after reading all the books that I have read, and press releases, and videos I've watched, and magazines, and so much more, I think I have a right to some kind of an opinion. And I think a lot of people out there in the public these days, we the people, not the elites controlling our world, but we the people everywhere are waking up that there is a secret establishment, and they are working to serve their own ends. And apparently they have an agenda to bring about a new world order, depopulate the planet. In other words, they don't need the people anymore. Historic times, the kings needed huge amounts of people to defend the country. And the neighboring kingdom needed huge amounts of people to defend the country. Humans were used for warfare. And then, of course, the defeated country would be pillaged, the women raped, men killed, children killed. 8 times from 1000 AD to 1300, there were 8 crusades. And they slaughtered all the Arabs coming down from the north, across the landmass, above the Mediterranean, from Germany, England, France, Italy, Spain, everywhere, Austria. And slaughtered the Arabs, men, women, and children, taking over the castles, acquiring all the wealth. And then 10, 20, 30 years later, some Arab leader would rise up and evict them all, murdering all the pilgrims, while the elites, America's secret establishment, the death head, the elites, would hop on a ship and sail back to their countries via the Mediterranean. 8 times. And of course, we all know about the last couple hundred years, since Rothschilds and Theodore Herschel, and even Albert Pike, leader of the Freemasons in the United States, Southern jurisdiction, general for the South during the war between the North and the South, and pardoned by the president for the North because they were both Freemasons. Again, so much America's secret establishment. So anyways, a couple hundred years ago, back in Germany, they had this philosophy that was being taught. And it was basically action causes reaction. So if they want to increase in the USA gun control laws in an eventual aim to disarm the American people, they have to create an action so that the citizens and the legislators, the senators, and the president will support the reaction. So hence we have Sandy Hook school shootings, Boston bombing, San Bernardino, French bombings, recently Brussels bombings. And apparently the symbols are obvious if you go look at this stuff. 911 was an action which allowed the reaction to invade the Middle East. and Webster Tarpley in his book on 911, Judy Wood's book, that apparently directed energy beams weaponry use. There's much evidence to support that the columns inside the buildings were pre-rigged with explosives, causing typical demolition techniques. Even Building 7, which wasn't hit by any plane, and Silverstein, the owners, said pull it. It's recorded, you can go watch videos. And they pulled it, and it fell just like a pancake. It was pre-rigged with explosives. So yeah, there has to be a secret group of people behind the scenes controlling all this for a particular purpose. And apparently it's biblical from my point of view, from my research. They are trying to destroy Christianity and other religions and bringing us via the United Nations, the gay agenda, and so much more. Even Disney World, today, when I was reading the news, has said they won't make any more movies in Georgia if the governor signs some legislation that allows people to opt out of performing gay marriages and other things if it interferes with their religious beliefs. And I think the legislation is a good piece of legislation. It's fair. If I was a minister or a priest and I believed that adultery was wrong, bisexuality was wrong, pansexuality, we can have sex with anything, is wrong, transgenderism, using genetically bioengineering to, I guess, make a man into a woman or a woman into a man, or maybe even both sexes. I think it's a kind of an insane programs going on. Monsanto, genetically modifying foods, apparently recently obtained the rights to start growing without any kind of permits some kind of genetically modified maize corn. So sooner or later, if we're not already doing it, we're all going to be consuming genetically modified organisms which our bodies will see as enemies and attack them. Just like the vaccines. Apparently on the news also today, this morning, I'm seeing a video on YouTube, and apparently one village, all the children received a vaccine, and 75% of them were in the hospital. A couple of them were killed. That can't be good. Can't be good at all. So what does that have to do with the secret establishment? And isn't the secret establishment humans, if they are humans at all, that are planning all this, spending trillions of dollars, weaponizing all the countries, seemingly preparing for World War III? What kind of sinister goal do they have? So let me get to reading the book. Sorry for such a lengthy opening, but the things I'm paying attention to in the alternate news, the regular mainstream news, the YouTube videos, it's just getting, I thought it was bizarre, but what do you call greater than bizarre? Past bizarre. Insane. So maybe studying some of this stuff will help make it a little more sense, including, I know I'm wearing it out, but the Morris Jessup's material on series number 82, I just finished part 4. This is series 83, part 4. But Morris Jessup in the case for UFOs, I'm not trying to beat that up or wear out that topic, but I think the point I was trying to make is there are forces behind the scenes that are real. You can call it paranormal, aliens, UFOs, magic, witchcraft. and which brings to me a little bit of irony. I was watching some other videos this morning. I've been busy. It's about 11 o'clock Saturday morning, March 2016. But apparently there's plenty of evidence that Donald Trump is pretty high up in the Freemasonry circuit. It's been said he's a high priest. And in the Illuminati, that one means he's into some kind of an Illuminati witchcraft. The high priest in Freemasonry. Strangely enough, Hillary Clinton, according to Larry Nichols, interviewing with Alex Jones or Lisa Haven, and I'm sure others. You can look this up. Larry Nichols. He was the security guard and handler for the Clintons in their earlier political escapades. Governor, president. And he says one of the problems they had with Hillary is weekends she would hop on a plane and go to Las Vegas for apparently to participate in witches' rituals. I guess Hillary Clinton is a witch. And Donald Trump, I guess you could say, is a warlock, a high priest. And all this circles around the Illuminati, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, all the mystery schools of Babylon I've been talking about. Constance Kuby in her book, Beware of the Rainbow. There's thousands of these organizations, whether they're lodges or groups or temples. The fundamental theme behind all of this is Lucifer worship. Baal, B-A-A-L, Satan. Even that statue they wanted to put up in Oklahoma on the state building with the devil with the horns embracing two young children who were looking up at him in awe. Well, as you can expect, there was a few problems getting that statue put on the state building front lawn. So they next had a grand opening or a presentation of this statue in Detroit. And all these people showed up dressed in garb like witches and all kind of other Satanists. And then, of course, Miley Cyrus, Beyonce, Madonna, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, so many more in football halftime shows, Grammys, Olympic openings are doing these satanic rituals, like an Indiana Jones movie, where they were doing those Kali rituals. Crazy, you think? All right, let me read from the book. All right, on this book, for this part 4, we're coming up to a new chapter. Quite an important topic, considering where we are today. How the order, that would be the skull and bones, creates war and revolution. The operational history of the order can only be understood within a framework of the Hegelian dialectic process. The Hegelian dialectic. Quite simply, this is the notion that conflict creates history. From this axiom, it follows that controlled conflict can create a predetermined history. So the controlled conflict, like 9/11, created a predetermined history that the senators and representatives and the president and the people would all be angry and allow for the invasion to the Middle East. For example, when the Trilateral Commission discusses managed conflict, as it does extensively in its literature, the Commission implies that managed use of conflict for long-run predetermined ends, the New World Order, the New Age, eliminating Christianity, Jesus, and other religions, and bringing us this new age of Luciferian satanic religion. I'm adding that part. Not for a mere random exercise of manipulative control to solve a problem. only reading my highlighted portions. The synthesis sought by the establishment is called the New World Order. Antony Sutton's a much smarter guy than me. At some point, we all have to embrace the fact that they are planning something, and I believe it's quite sinister for the rest of us. I got a little point to make. Friday, I was downtown where I live here in the mountains of North Carolina, and they had this huge gay rally going on, screaming in the streets. I took a couple pictures. So it was obvious to me, seeing the signs and all the people, that it was an organized event. So I suspected they probably had those gay rallies all over the country, and I noticed a couple of the posters were targeted at Republicans. So there is some force behind the scenes controlling all this. These people didn't all show up on their own. How would they have known? Just saying, when I read this book, think about that. Without controlled conflict, this New World Order will not come about. Random individual actions of persons in society would not lead to this synthesis. It's artificial. Therefore, it has to be created. And this is being done with the calculated, managed use of conflict. And all the while this synthesis is being sought, there is no profit in playing the involved parties against one another. This explains why the international bankers backed the Nazis, the Soviet Union, North Korea, North Vietnam, ad nausea against the United States. The conflict built profits while pushing the world ever closer to one world government. The process continues today. So the international bankers, I'm thinking of the book Who Financed Hitler by Suzanne and James Poole. John Perkins in his book, An Economic Hitman, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I've gone over these in previous videos. So the international bankers are backing the Nazis. These are the people who own the United States Federal Reserve, who created it during the Christmas vacation in 1913. Thus allowed World War I to start 6 months later in June. So these international bankers who own our Federal Reserve, using our own money against us, are using that money to finance the Nazis, the Soviet Union, North Korea, North Vietnam, against the United States. So they own our Federal Reserve, and they loan money to our government to fight the enemy, and they're loaning money to the enemy to fight us. Collecting interest on both sides, of course, making themselves immensely wealthy with all their industrial and arms manufacturing corporations and other satanic evil corporations involved in black projects. Projects the public knows nothing about, like mind control, deception, cartoons that your kids watch that are programming them, TV programs that we watch that are programming us, school books, teachers, all involved in insidious attacks on our mental perception, trying to bring about a planned reality. Like I said, the Luciferian satanic worship. And apparently these forces hate God and hate Jesus. And as Sarah Silverstein says, the comedian, yes, we killed Jesus, and if he comes back, we're going to kill him again. You can go look that up. Crazy. I'm only reading my highlighted portions here. It says here, a New York State Commission had not seized the documents as part of an investigation into subversion in the United States. In brief, the existence of these documents is just as important as the nature of the contents. It demonstrates joint planned actions, ergo, a conspiracy. So it's not a conspiracy dream, it's a real conspiracy. Page 117, Memorandum Number 1, Create Conflict and the Dialectic Process. Again, I'm just reading my highlighted portion, so if it seems like there's a piece missing, there probably is. But when I read my sentences or paragraph, I'll add my commentary, and maybe we can go from there. Our first hypothesis, that the U.S. was ruled by an elite secret society, was supported by documentary evidence, such as secret society does exist, such a secret society does exist, its membership is concealed, and disclosure of membership is not a voluntary effort. Further, since publication of the first volume, the Sterling Library at Yale University, which has many major holdings of their records, has refused to allow researchers further access to the Russell Trust papers, the legal name for the order, the Skull and Bones. So the Russell family was part of the bloodlines of the Illuminati, the elites, and they were involved at Yale University of forming the Skull and Bones fraternity, as some people would like to think. It's just something innocent, where a bunch of guys have a little fun and hazing. But later on wind up being our leaders and presidents and CEOs and orchestrating some diabolical activities, like World War I and World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnamese War. Remember, these people control the communists and the Russians and the Zionists, and they control our bank and our politicians. They control both sides. That is the Hegelian dialectic. And the people are none the wiser. Moving on here. However, there is another frame for historical analysis that has never, so far as we can determine, been utilized, i.e. to use a framework of Hegelian logic to determine if those elites who control the state use the dialectic process to create a predetermined historical synthesis. The most convincing glimpses are in the late Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, which we shall quote below. Rarely some politicians on the periphery of elitist power have allowed brief insights into the public eye. For example, President Woodrow Wilson, the guy who was controlled by the Zionist New York Jewish folks, and allowed the Federal Reserve to be created over the Christmas holiday, while all the politicians were on vacation. Later said he regretted doing that. He sold out the United States. We lost our sovereignty. We lost our independence when these elitists took over the Federal Reserve, our money. And since then, FYI, they've crashed the system 8 or 9 times, and families from California to North Carolina to Maine to Texas, Ohio, everywhere, Nebraska, who had built up wealth, all of a sudden couldn't pay their bills, and these elitist rich banksters could buy up everything on pennies on the dollar, just like they do on the stock market, the manipulation. So they don't want we, the people, to build up personal wealth and families to compete against them. Actually, in their opinion, according to Rockefeller, competition is a sin. I think Rockefeller said that, or was it Rothschild? So, for example, President Woodrow Wilson made the revealing statement, some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the fields of commerce and manufacturing know that there is a power so organized so subtle, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. Oh my! Can we believe President Woodrow Wilson? So anyways, whoever read this book for me, I did the yellow highlights, but I did not do the ink and the other color highlights. So it's just quite interesting to see what whoever read this book before me read and what they highlighted and what I highlight. So this person in their own ink wrote, "This is how you get such mutation as a Rockefeller Democrat." Who and what is this power, and how is it used? This series argues that the current world situation has been deliberately created by the elitist power, more or less by manipulation of right and left elements. That would be Democratic and Republican. So they control both sides. They got half the people in the United States hating the Democrats. That would be the Republicans. And they got the other half hating the Republicans. That would be the Democrats. They're having those posters and those protests and screaming and howling and punching each other and getting vicious, not knowing they're all being manipulated like a puppet. Smarter guy than I. This is not the only book I've read here. We argue that the most powerful of all world elites has during the past 100 years or so developed both right and left elements to bring about a new world order. There is no question that the so-called establishment in the U.S. uses managed conflict, the practice of managing crises, to bring about a favorable outcome that is favorable to the elite, is freely admitted in the literature of, for example, the Trilateral Commission. Furthermore, there is no question that decisions of war and peace are made by a few in the elite and not by the many in the voting process through a political referendum. Finally, we will tie these decisions and operations back to the elite, and specifically to the order. Remember, the Skull and Bones is just one of thousands of these organizations. Into the Mystery School of Babylon. Remember, that is the area where the pyramids are and the Sphinx is. And in the hieroglyphics are the all-seeing eye and images of Ra, the Osiris, the being with the bird head, and Sun Horus, and Isis, we hear in the news. And we have the Federal Reserve, which was established by them over the Christmas vacation holiday in 1913, with the all-seeing eye and the pyramid on the $1 bill. It all ties together. Moving on. In the U.S., the British Commonwealth and French philosophy is based on the individual and the rights of the individual. So in the U.S., with our Constitution, Bill of Rights, the British Commonwealth, and France, philosophy is based on the individual and the rights of the individual. This is important. They want to make a switcheroo. They don't want the individual to be supreme. They want them to be supreme, and we the people to worship them like their gods, and they are, and want to be, the controllers of the state, i.e. the state will be God. Hence, we have no need for the real God or Jesus. This is communism. This is the Hegelian dialectic. Whereas in Germany, from the time of Kant through Fichte and Hegel up to 1945, the root philosophy has been universal brotherhood, rejection of individualism, and general opposition to Western classical liberal thought in almost all its aspects. You don't have to have a high IQ to understand this stuff. They want to enslave the people. They want to bring back the golden age. when there were kings and pharaohs and Caesars. Men like Genghis Khan could take armies and ride through Eastern Europe and the Middle East and slaughter everybody. Alexander the Great, Hitler, Caesar. And now, apparently the culprit is Zionism, along with all these secret mystery School of Babylon organizations. And even many Jewish Zionists have admitted that their God is Lucifer. German idealism, as we noted in earlier volumes of this series, was the philosophical basis for the work of Karl Marx and the left Hegelians, as well as Bismarck, Hitler, and the right Hegelians. Both Marx and Hitler have their philosophical roots in Hegel. So you got the communists in Russia fighting the Hitler people, National Socialists in Germany, and both of them are operating under the Hegelian dialectic philosophy, where the state will be supreme. We all know that's true. In Russia at that time, with Stalin and Lenin, the state was supreme, and they were slaughtering the people in the hundreds of millions. And in Germany, the same thing. They were slaughtering the people in the hundreds of millions, killing them and imprisoning them, all being controlled by some secret elitist people behind the scenes. And again, that's why I was doing the information, the book reviews on Morris Jessup, The Case for UFOs, and pointing out that behind the scenes throughout history has been some paranormal activity, even beings in the ocean invisible, using, I guess, an attractor and just sucking people up into the air, into some kind of ships. The Philadelphia experiment, where they put microwave transmitters all around the ship, and it disappeared and actually apparently moved in time. And when it reappeared, people were half in and half out of the bulkhead. So when you talk about the secret establishment, and all these mystery School of Babylon, the all-seeing eye and the pyramid on the dollar bill, what is this witchcraft? This priesthood, paranormal activity all about? And do these people who want to run our world and enslave us, what do they know? What should we know? From the Hegelian system of political thought, alien to most of us in the West, stems such absurdities as the state seem as the march of God through history. That the state is also God, so they want the state to be God. Now remember, in ancient times, God forbid you said something negative about the king, you would immediately be arrested and probably beheaded, just because he didn't like you. And some of their kings had sons who were absolutely insane psychopaths. And we've seen the TV shows and the movies. These crazies would wind up being the leadership. And again, if you said anything negative about them, you would be killed. And apparently, even in Cuba and other places, political dissidents are being arrested, imprisoned, and killed. Probably in half of the world. And when they take away the guns from we, the USA people, is that what is coming? Is that why they want to disarm us? That a citizen can only find freedom by worship and utter obedience to the state. So that's what they want. However, as we noted in how the order controls education, the Hegelian absurdities have thoroughly penetrated the U.S. educational system. So again, I say these things, but it's because I read books by people smarter than me. And I'm trying to make these videos to make this a conversation that we can all understand, not over our heads. I'm not a genius. Most people are not geniuses. We don't know what's going on, but some of us try to figure it out. So this other person wrote, as you can see on the top here, from reading this book like I'm reading it, they create gun control theses, or push for gun control, NIR against gun control, antithesis. So you got gun control is a thesis, and then they have an antithesis, which is pro-gun control, pro-gun. Gun confiscation is synthesis. So they got the thesis and the antithesis to bring about a synthesis. So the more of these Sandy Hook shootings or bombings and all that, they're aiming to disarm we the people, probably to bring about this reality where the state is God, and freedom is obedience to the state and worship of the state. This is slightly biblical too, if you read the Bible and you know what's going on. And we all are spiritual beings in these biological bodies. So apparently there's some huge competition for the souls of men. Satan, Lucifer, wants your soul, my soul, when we leave this world. And it seems like there's a lot of possession. If you watch some of the characters on TV or the videos, and you can see their face. It's like you're looking at an insane person. And apparently that's what you see when people get possessed, when they worship Satan, Lucifer, participate in these satanic rituals, and invite these demonic beings into their body, which may be one of the reasons why some people can shapeshift and they look kind of reptilian. How far does this go? How crazy is it? Under pressure from such organizations as the National Association, Educational Association, and major foundations. From this system of Hegelian philosophy comes the historical dialectic, i.e. that all historical events emerge from a conflict between opposing forces. So here the elitists are, controlling our Federal Reserve in 1913. 6 months later, World War I starts in 1914. And the money comes from these same elitists, probably using our USA tax dollars, and saying we, the USA people, are now responsible for that debt. How insane is this? Any idea of implementation of an idea may seem as thesis. So an implementation of an idea as thesis. This thesis will encourage emergence of opposing forces is known as antithesis. So they know when they do this, as you've seen in my phone here, the picture I took, the protesting Friday, a couple days ago, I think today's the 26th of March, the organized gay people and transgender people, and having signs like the Republicans want to look at my junk. I saw that on the sign. So they were targeting Republicans. So obviously it was a paid-for program, probably by Soros or other people supporting Hillary. So that would be the thesis. And then they would get people who would be opposing this propaganda, would be antithesis, to create the conflict, to have some kind of synthesis where the government would step in and have to make regulations and controls, which would be the synthesis. Truly, 1 + 1 = 2. So you have to get the attack and then the defenders to create the outcome. Hegelian dialectic, Hegelian philosophy. We all know, because even George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Obama, Clinton, Kissinger, the Pope, Gordon Brown in the UK, all these leaders have said, we need a new world order. That would be the synthesis. So how do you bring it about? You need the thesis and the antithesis to fight each other. The Republicans and the Democrats to fight each other. The gays and the straights to fight each other. The blacks and the whites to fight each other. The Muslims and the Christians to fight each other. Etc., etc., etc. Men, women, rich, poor. Karl Marx in Das Kapital poised capitalism as thesis and communism as antithesis. So there you go again. They created these realities of capitalism and communism, i.e. they call it socialism. So people will actually get radical and angry and fight in defendance of capitalism, and in defendance of communism, in defendance of socialism, and in defendance of personal freedoms and right to do what you want. Homosexuality, transgenderism, absurdities, pansexuality, having sex with anything, everybody, group sex, orgies, like the Bohemian Grove, where a lot of our politicians and leading people of the world, CEOs, have been photographed, where they have the cremation of care ceremony with a gigantic owl with a fire in the belly, where they throw in a baby, dressed in long robes, naked, bringing homosexuals for sex, all a grand Illuminati witchcraft-type satanic rituals. As Alex Jones snuck in there in video that you can go on YouTube and see. And then, of course, we have Arizona Wilder with the David Icke interview, where she was raised as a child to be a witch and participated in Illuminati rituals, where these people would viciously attack a victim laid on an altar, drink the blood, eat the flesh, and some of them would actually shapeshift into a reptilian. Apparently the leader in the center of the group, as described by Arizona Wilder, is called Pindar. And if it were just that one case, I would say, Rick, you're crazy. But I could sit here for an hour or two and cite case after case after case after case. We're all aware of the witches that were burned at the stake in Salem, and the witches over there in Europe, and the Inquisition, and all the people burned at the stake throughout history, even in the Bible, with Jesus casting out demons in people, healing people, blind people, deaf people, people with leprosy, raising Lazarus from the dead. So this paranormal reality is what I keep trying to focus on a little bit. Why my series is named Freemasonry. And if you read their books, there's a lot of this Mystery School of Babylon teachings, which we will go over after I continue wearing out the topic of this book, and The Case for UFOs by Morris Jessup, because I really want to make my point. In Morris Jessup's book, there are so many cited, documented examples of strangeness happening in the world for thousands of years. And in this book really gets in deep into these Freemasonic or other kinds of Mystery School of Babylon skull and bones cults, who wind up being our leaders and CEOs and elites in our country. There's no mistake about it. And they use the death head as their logo. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out. Remember, in Proverbs it says, "He who seeks refuge in me, I shall be thy shield." And remember Rabbi Marvin Antleman, who wrote the book To Eliminate the Opate. Opate means believe in God. They are afraid of us believing in God and praying because they know we can access the spiritual world, the paranormal. They're using the paranormal, like that one story I've told many times, where this group of people decided to go camping and hiking for the weekend. They came to this ledge and they looked down, and there they saw a group of people in a circle, apparently what appeared to be a witch's circle, doing a ritual. And in the midst of the circle, this reptilian, 12-foot tall, 11-foot tall being appeared, poof. And they freaked out up on the ledge looking at this, and they started to run the other way when they noticed that the reptilian being looked up and saw them. And then all the witches in the circle looked up and saw them. So while they were fleeing, and right in the midair, the being appeared in front of them and stopped them. I thought I'd do something a little different for a minute, as I usually do. Let's look at a couple books. I've got so many books to do and I've done so much. But who wants to read this book? King of the Witches. I think I make this stuff up. Oddities, a book of unexplained facts. I can tell you, this history is documented. There are people who have spent their life researching newspaper clippings, archives all over the world to write these books of all these weird things. The Wizard of Marius, the prophecies of Nostradamus, the devil's hoof marks, the planet Vulcan, the ships on the ice. The guy wasn't doing fiction. He was looking up documented facts. And I've got several books on the government involved in using psychics to leave their body and spy on enemies. And that the mind control technologies goes way beyond that right now in 2016. Even with the use of the cell phones, sky spraying of heavy metals in the air, which gets in our blood, and subliminal trances and mesmerization and symbols. I notice it all the time on the TV programming. Texas Rangers, it was just right there, that star in the circle kept zooming up on you. The all-seeing eye on American Idol zooming up on you. The Eurovision, the Europe's version of American Idol, where the person who won the contest was called Conchita Wurst. Wurst means sausage, Conchita means a female part. The face was dressed like Jesus, the body in a silky dress, singing the song, The Phoenix Rising, which has the words, "You can't stop us." This is crazy. Who can't see this? When there's this book here, I really have to sit down and read. Probably, if I had read it earlier, it probably wouldn't make as much sense if I read it now, because of my continuing research has given me more knowledge, how to see things in a better light. The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky, the person who helped create the Theosophist Society, this New Age philosophy. I'll just read one little bit here from page 393. The Man in the Moon, Osiris Sut, Jehovah Satan, Christ Judas, and other lunar twins is often charged with bad conduct. It is the lunar phenomenon. The moon was one of the moon. In the lunar phenomenon, the moon was one as the moon, which was twofold in sex and threefold in character, as mother, child, and adult male. Thus the child of the moon became the consort to his own mother. It could not be helped if there was to be any reproduction. He was compelled to be his own father. Well, like I said, I need to read this, and it's probably going to tie right up there with the witchcraft book. Then they got this guy called Maitreya, the Christ they say that is coming. Apparently Maitreya was an ancient god over in Europe 1,000 years ago in Rome and all that. Here's a card I have using it as a marker inside the book. Looks like some Rosicrucian material. But Maitreya, let me just read you a little bit from apparently this Maitreya person. My dear friends, I am happy indeed to be with you once more and to tell you my face will soon be known. Your brothers support me, give me their trust and their love. a love which I cherish. So shall it be with you, my friends, when we meet together. Soon you will see the manifestation of a great change in the world. That change is wrought by my energies and presence. Have no fear, all is well, and proceeds to plan. My brothers, the master of wisdom, will lead you forward into the light of that wisdom, which is theirs, will unfold for you the panorama of man's past, will teach you the ancient laws and guide your feet into the future. Look to them as the elder brother, and trusting, let them show you the lighted way. There's more here, but I think you get it. A lot of the New Age, and as we keep talking about the Hegelian dialectic and the philosophy of creating events to bring about a predetermined outcome, this is a book I haven't read yet, which I need to read, which is rated high up there. But we can say that they're probably using the Hegelian dialectic philosophy in The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. So they're using all these incidences and disasters and events that they put in the media that they own to even probably make money in the stock market. Create legislation and policies to further the aim of the New World Order, biodiversity, global warming, climate change, sustainability, Agenda 21, common purpose, common core. Just to name a few. And I keep mentioning this book, which I have to read again. I did read it once before I was putting my little highlights inside. So I have to read it again, which will probably be, again I'll say I'll probably learn more reading it the second time around. But it's James Poole, Suzanne Poole, Who Financed Hitler, tells all. Here's the Duke and Duchess of Windsor on a visit to the Brauchsteingarten Garden in Germany. So the leaders in England were visiting Germany. One of the most illuminating studies of Nazism. This book explains how in a decade the Nazi Party developed from a meager collection of poor crackpots into a national organization. I need to pull up that picture I took of the gay protest. And so they're creating an organization with all those people into the New Age and the gay agenda and all those other liberal so-called activities where the people don't even know it, but they're being fooled into worshiping the devil. The most famous foreign contributors were the American Henry Ford, the Italian Benito Mussolini, and the Anglo-Dutch oil magnate Henry Derriter. The party's remorseless techniques for extracting every penny from the desperate followers suggest that Nazism of that period should be classified as a cult or a sect, not a party. We'll get that same thing today. And again, to prove that there's something really strange behind the scenes. This book I got quite a while ago. I read it completely. Genesis 6 Giants. So apparently, throughout history, there have been these very unusual people and apparently it involves the government too. If you look up Smithsonian Institute, here it says in this book, page 113, Enoch's Giants. The Book of Enoch also elaborates on the Nephilim. This is all biblical beings. And the woman became pregnant and gave birth to a great giants whose height were 300 cubits. These giants consumed the produce of all the people until the people detested feeding them. So the giants turned against the people in order to eat them. And they began to sin against birds, wild beasts, reptiles, and fish. And their flesh was devoured by one by the other, and they drank blood. A lot of stuff in the Bible and ancient history tells us all this stuff I've been going over. This was an awesome book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. One name in here that jumps out at me that's concerning. Let's see if I can find it. A lot of names in here. They got the Rothschilds. Look at all the Freemasonic symbolism, Illuminati symbolism, Satanic symbolism. Fritz Springmeier, if you can get this book, it's a good read and probably a collector's item worth some serious money. And lastly, for my little intermission of my reading the America's Secret Establishment, let us not forget Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons. I'll just read any kind of given thing in here. I just flipped it open. I didn't even highlight it. I've probably never read this before. So why don't I just read it now? 287. Just to show you, no matter where you look in this book, the evidence is there. Marcion, the Gnostic, said, "The soul of the true Christian, adopted as a child by the Supreme Being, to whom it has long been a stranger, receives from him the spirit and divine life. It is led and confirmed by this gift in a pure and holy life like that of God, and if it so completes its earthly career in charity, chastity, and sanctity, it will one day be disengaged from its material envelope as a ripe grain is detached from the straw, and as the young bird escapes from its shell. Like the angels, it will share in the bliss of good and perfect Father, reclothed in an aerial body or organ, made like unto the angels of heaven." You see, my brother, what is the meaning of Masonic light? You see why the east of the lodge, where the initial letters of the name of the deity overhangs the master, is the place of light. Light is the contradistinguished from darkness, is good as contradistinguished from evil. It is that light, the true knowledge of deity, the eternal God, for which Masons in all ages have sought. Still, Masonry marches steadily onward toward that light, shines in the great distance, and the light of that day when evil overcome and vanquishes shall fade away and disappear forever. And light and life be the one law of the universe, and it's an eternal harmony. The degree of the rose teaches three things: the unity, the immovability, and the goodness of God, the immortality of the soul, and the ultimate defeat and extinction of evil and wrong and sorrow by a Redeemer or Messiah, yet to come, if he has not already appeared. I never read that before. But I'm just saying, you go buy that book and read it and see for yourself. The evidence is clear and the evidence is everywhere. There's more going on behind reality. Like a lot of people don't believe in God anymore. Look what we just read in Albert Pike's, the leader for the Freemasonic organization in America. This whole southern jurisdiction, and a general for the South in the war between the North and the South. So then we get back to this book with these elitists who run things behind the scenes with this Hegelian dialectic of cause and effect. Thesis and antithesis to fight each other to create a synthesis, a mixture of the Republican and a mixture of the Democrats to create state as God and the people to be obedient. All right, moving on. It's America's Secret Establishment, an introduction to the Order of the Skull and Bones. Antony Sutton. Communists must lead to a society characterized by a synthesis of the two conflicting forces. The clash of opposites must be the Hegelian system, bring about a society neither capitalist nor communist. Moreover, in the Hegelian scheme of events, this new synthesis will reflect the concept of the state as God and the individual as a totally subordinate to an all-powerful state. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if they disarm the people, of course. And many countries in the West, in Europe, in the Middle East, in China, even pre-Hitler Germany, Hitlerian National Socialist Party, Russia, they had to disarm the people before they started slaughtering the people. Just saying. What then is the function of a parliament or congress for Hegelians? These institutions are merely to allow individuals to feel that their opinion has some value and to allow a government to take advantage of whatever wisdom the peasant, in the United States I think we call the people who don't know what's going on zombies, may actually demonstrate. As Hegel puts it, by virtue of this participation, subjective liberty and conceit with the general opinion, individuals can show themselves palpably efficacious and enjoy the satisfaction of feeling themselves to count for something. So when you do support a Democratic Party and Hillary wins, all these Democrats will go up in glory and pat themselves on the backs. And of course the Republicans will all get angry and nasty and hate the situation, and vice versa. If Trump wins, all the Republicans will be so happy and satisfied that they fought for something, while all the Democrats will be seething in anger and maybe riots in the street like an O.J. Simpson threat if he gets off in his trial for murder. They threaten us. Look what that Disney now threatening Georgia, that if they sign that legislation to allow people to opt out of marrying gay people, let's say they're a church, then Disney is going to withdraw any filming projects, movies, whatever, TV programming from Georgia. So they are threatening the state's politicians and the governor with money if they don't get their way. And Disney's already been investigated by many people, and the symbolism of Satanism and Luciferium and Masonry, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Mystery School of Babylon, the symbolism in the Disney movies and cartoons and videos and all that is quite clear. Don't believe me? Go look it up on the YouTube, watch some videos, put your feet up, have a cup of coffee, and after you watch for a couple hours, you decide. War, the organized conflict of nations, for Hegelians, is the only visible outcome of the clash between ideas. As John Dewey, and the Hegelian darling of the modern educational system, put it, war is the most effective preacher of the vanity of all merely finite interest. It puts an end to that selfish egotism of the individual by which he would claim his life, his property as his own and as his family's. So they're using wars and conflicts between nations to, again, to feed people's egos and feelings and sense of belonging. How many people in the United States really understand that the all of the Middle East, from Tunisia to Egypt, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, buildings bombed, people killed, lots of drama, and it's a planned event to take all of those territories down, apparently eliminate a lot of the population by bombings and guns and drones and missiles. And the ones they don't kill, they want to ship them to Europe and the United States, bringing them about, I guess, another thesis, an antithesis, to bring about a synthesis. Conflict. And they use war. 911 helped them accomplish this murder and mayhem in the Middle East. Of course, this war-promoting Dewey paragraph is conveniently forgotten by the National Education Association, which is today busy in the peace movement. So these people supporting war, they participating in peace movements, they lie with words. That's one of the key things you can learn about Satanism and all that. Whatever they say, turn it around, and it's really the opposite. So when it's a peace initiative, it's not a peace initiative. When it's women's rights, it's not women's rights. They don't really care about the gay people. They're using them for their thesis and antithesis. They want to rile up the Christians. And they're using the gay people. And the gay people don't even see this coming. It will turn on them. Above all, the Hegelian doctrine is the divine right of states rather than the divine rights of kings. The state for Hegel and Hegelians is God on earth. The march of God in history is the cause for the existence of states. Their foundation is the power of reason realizing itself as will. For Hegel, the individual is nothing. The individual has no rights. Morality consists solely in following a leader. So they don't want you to believe in God, they want you to believe in a leader. Compare this to the spirit and letter of the Constitution of the United States. We the people, that's what's in the Constitution, we the people, grant the state some powers and reserve all the others to the people. Separation of church and state is built into the U.S. Constitution. A denial of Hegel's "the state is God on earth." Yet compare this legal requirements to the actions of the order in the United States. The group in England, the Illuminati in Germany, and the political bureau in Russia. For these elitists, the state is supreme, and a self-appointed elite running the state acts indeed as God on earth. And if you pay attention to how the police treat people now, they're trying to program all of us to be obedient, to fear them. Think about that. Informative book, you think? I remember over the years, I would discuss issues of why we have the craziness in the world, 9/11, the wars in the Middle East. And people repeatedly would say, well, who's behind it? What's behind it, you know? And the programming from the media, the state-owned media, the Illuminati, Zionist, Jewish-owned media, everybody knows this. I could go get a couple books that Jewish people write about the Jewish empire, the Jewish control of Hollywood. Everybody knows this. Got a big B here. And throughout history, if you read John Robinson and many other books, Nestor Webster, the Jewish individuals were the financiers, magicians, and other advisors to kings and queens and elite throughout history. Why? And then in one video I went over, I found some documentation stating that the Jewish people had been evicted from almost 100 countries over the past 2,000 years. The Bolshevik Jews going into Russia, killing the Tsar and his family. Horrific situation. Financed by the Jewish folks in New York City, in the world, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the bloodlines of the Illuminati. They're into the Kabbalah, magic, witchcraft. Look at the programming from Hollywood. So who is behind all the sinister activities on Earth when the United States, for example, spending $460 billion a year on its empire building of the New World Order, taking over countries? Can you imagine if they weren't doing that, how wealthy we, the citizens, would be? I mean, is this country ours, or is it theirs? And if it is theirs, do they have plans for us to be slaves? Like the Hunger Game movie. Are these good questions? Are these serious questions? And if we wind up as slaves, our children as slaves, their children as slaves, is it our fault for not doing anything? When we can do a little research and see some truths. With that, I'll continue reading. The concept of the Hegelian dialectic is obviously beyond comprehension of modern textbook writers. No historical or political theory textbook that we know of discusses the possible use of the Hegelian dialectic in American politics. Yet its use has been recorded by Professor Carol Quigley in Tragedy and Hope, a trade book based on documents of the Council of Foreign Relations, another organization, into the Mystery School of Babylon, secrets, making decisions for we the people, basically stealing our country, our resources, our wealth, our rights, our freedom. Quigley not only describes banker J.P. Morgan's use of the right and the left, the Democrats and the Republicans, as competitive devices for political manipulation of society, but adds an eye-opening comment. Unfortunately, we do not have space here for this great and untold story, but it must be remembered that what we do say is part of a much larger picture. That's in Tragedy and Hope, page 945. That's a pretty big book. This much larger picture is partly revealed in this book. First, let's briefly note that how J.P. Morgan uses the dialectic process as a means of political control for financial ends. So they control our politicians, they control the banks, they control the industry, they control the media, they control Hollywood, they control everything. So it's no doubt in my mind that they're sucking money out of the country and taxing the people, we the people, to pay for everything. And now they say we owe, what, 13, 17 trillion that we can never pay? Money that was never spent on us? We have been deceived. Who was it that said that if the people knew what we were up to, that we would be lynched? Wasn't that George Bush Sr.? If we knew what they had done, George Bush Sr. says, they would be lynched. The only college attended by Morgan was 2 to 3 years in the mid-1850s, at University of Göttingen, Germany, which was the center for the Hegelian activism. So apparently the Skull and Bones Yale University was sending people to Germany to study the Hegelian dialectic philosophy. The state is supreme and the people are slaves. Freedom is being obedient to the state. God is state. There is no other God, according to them. Yet German Hegelianism is apparent in J.P. Morgan's approach to political parties. Morgan used them all. And if people don't know it, these big corporations owned by these elitists do financially support both parties. They make donations to Hillary, they make donations to Trump. They make donations to Bush, they make donations to Cruz. They make donations to Sanders. They want to keep the thesis and antithesis alive, the battle. So people can be out there supporting their candidate, carrying signs, down with the other party. All right, moving on this book. The names Harriman, Bush, Artson, Whitney, even Stimson do not appear in the Anglo-American establishment. The order came through partner Henry Davidson, whose son H.P. Davidson Jr. was initiated in 1920. The elderly Henry Davidson bought Thomas Lamont brought Thomas Lamont and William Straight into the Morgan firm. Just taking more of these people who are in the Skull and Bones and how they're being placed in high places all over the world. Got a big bee on my left making a noise. These partners were instrumental in building the left wing of Morgan's dialectic, including the Communist Party USA, with Julius Hammer, whose son is today chairman of Occidental Petroleum, Armand Hammer. We find in 1984, for example, that Ariel Harriman, Skull and Bones 13, is elder statesman of the Democratic Party, while George Bush, of the Skull and Bones, is a Republican vice president. So the order puts people in high positions in both parties, and they take all their directions for whatever they do in life from the order. They don't make their own decisions. As Newt Gingrich said on a video I watched recently, that the reason why the establishment is anti-Trump is, this is Newt Gingrich saying this, is he's not part of the secret society and hasn't been initiated. But my research say he is of the part of the establishment, America's secret establishment. And if you look at his condo, you can go online and look at it, and some of the photographs of him doing the symbols with the hand and stuff like that, and other things, it becomes apparent, I guess, that maybe he's a high priest in the Freemasons. While, of course, Hillary is being charged with being a witch, which I say is all part of the mystery school of Babylon, Satanism, which is like the Giants, the Book of the Giants with Stephen Quayle I showed you early in this video. They got these skeletons with heads the size of a refrigerator. And this is in the Bible too, Nephilim, and apparently these beings from beyond, maybe entities that were kicked out of heaven, outcast angels, demons, apparently mated with humans and created some very horrific creatures. And this is in the ancient Atlantis stories also. And apparently this got so much out of control, it was one reason why they had the great flood on Earth. Humanity needed to be erased. It had been so polluted with creatures not of the design of God. As we all know in mythology, half snake, half man, half horse, half man. And if you do read on the Atlantis material, you'll find out that when Atlantis was sinking and they made their way to Egypt and other parts of the world, as we have seen on the hieroglyphics on pyramids, by the way, they had all these odd-looking creatures. Stuff to consider. So I was reading here. We find in 1984, for example, that Ariel Harriman, the Order 13, is an elder statesman in the Democratic Party, while George Bush, the Order 49, is a Republican vice president and leader of the misnamed moderate, actually extremist wing of the Republican Party. In the center, we have the so-called independent John Anderson, who in fact receives heavy financial support from the elite. So not only do the elite finance the left, the Democrats, the right, the Republicans, but even the people that they trump up as our heroes, defying the establishment, like Trump, or Ron Paul, or Ross Perot in a previous election. They always try to find somebody that the people will get behind. But it seems like it's a great deception, repeatedly. All right, moving on. College textbooks present war and revolution as more or less accidental results of conflicting forces. Antony Sutton, a smarter guy than me. If you don't believe me, maybe you can believe him. The decay of political negotiation into physical conflict comes about, according to these books, after variant efforts to avoid war. Unfortunately, this is nonsense. War is always a deliberate, creative act by individuals. So right now we also have a problem with the Great Awakening, as they call it. A lot of people waking up to the truth. And apparently, in my opinion, the only way the elites can save their control, their empire, their establishment, is to pull off some big catastrophe. Blame it on aliens, blame it on a planet Nibiru pole shift. With all the electronic technologies, HARP systems, sky spraying, computers and all that, the holographic images apparently they placed in the sky, like that great city hovering over in China. So they have to cause something huge to get everybody distracted. And with all their computers, they probably know which people are in the know, like me and probably you who are watching this video. And those people will be targeted as dissidents for elimination. According to history, this is the way it's done. There's nothing new about this. French Revolution, first thing they do is they go kill all the people of the opposition, the intelligent people, school teachers, and other people who are aware of reality, versus the mass mob of people who do and believe whatever they're told by the TV programming, shows like Ellen, and magazines and newspapers. They believe the information they're told. They believe Arabs with box cutters pulled off 9/11. They believe that Sandy Hook wasn't a staged event with crisis actors, and so much more. Western textbooks also have gigantic gaps. For example, after World War II, the tribunals set up to investigate Nazi war criminals were careful to censor any materials recording Western assistance to Hitler. So that book by the Pools, Who Financed Hitler, they don't want we the people to know this stuff. By the same token, Western textbooks on Soviet economic development omit any description of the economic and financial aid given to the 1917 revolution in Russia, where the Bolshevik Jewish folks who were trained and sent from New York City to kill the Tsar and his family took over that vast continent. With the aid, I'm finding out in this book, with American troops. But the people weren't told this. It was actually illegal back then for America to be financially, economically, and in helping them with their industrial factories. It was against the law. But behind the scenes, these secret established folks were doing that. And subsequent economic development by Western firms and banks. Revolution is always recorded as a spontaneous event by the politically and economically deprived against an autocratic state. Never in Western textbooks will you find the evidence that revolutions need finance, and the source of the finance in many cases traces back to Wall Street. So again, this is where the 17 trillion that the powers that be say we people of the USA owe. They've been using this money to create this situation to bring about a worldwide revolution, i.e. New Age, New World Order, where Christianity and other religions have to be eliminated, belief in God, period. And of course they will have a supreme being called the Messiah or some kind of God on earth, who they will declare that we all have to bow down to. And we will all have to be monitored 24/7, microchipped, cameras and everything else. As crazy as it seems to be the truth. Consequently, it can be argued that our Western history is every bit as distorted, censored, and largely useless as that of Hitler's Germany, or the Soviet Union, or Communist China. No Western foundation will award grants to investigate such topics. Few Western academics can survive by researching these topics. And certainly no major publisher will easily accept manuscripts reflecting such arguments. So these kinds of truths are not going to get out to the public through the normal channels. In fact, there is another largely unrecorded history, and it tells a story quite different than our sanitized textbooks. It tells a story of the deliberate creation of war, the knowing finance of revolution to change governments, and the use of conflict to create a new world order. The order is to create a new synthesis, a new world order along Hegelian lines where the state is absolute and the individual can find freedom only in blind obedience to the state. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but God gave me this life, this brain, this opportunity to exist. And nobody gets off planet Earth alive, at least we humans anyways. And I'm not going to submit to being an obedient slave to the state. That's just me. Memorandum number 2, Operational Vehicles for Conflict Creation. Our first task is to break an almost universally held mindset, i.e. that communists and elite capitalists are bitter enemies. I've been saying this all along. The people are led to believe that we capitalists, we free people, who go out and earn money, buy a property, invest in stocks and bonds, and start businesses, capitalism, are enemies to the communists. And the truth is they're both part of the same forces controlling the world. They keep everybody at each other. This Marxist axiom is a false statement, and for a century has fooled academics and investigators alike. To illustrate this mindset, let's look at a report on revolutionaries in the U.S. compiled by the respected Scotland Yard, London in 1919. London police investigators were tracking the Bolshevik Revolution and attempting to identify its Western supporters. When it came to men with long beards and even longer overcoats, most police departments had no problem. They looked like revolutionaries, therefore they must be revolutionaries. And I'm only reading my highlighted portions here. There appears to be no doubt about his connection with the Guarantee Trust Company, although it is surprising that so large and influential an enterprise should have dealings with the Bolshevik concern. Scotland Yard had picked up an accurate report that the Soviets were deeply involved with Guarantee Trust of New York, but they couldn't believe it and dropped this line of investigation. David Rockefeller has met regularly with the KGB agent in the United States. Weekly lunch meetings is a close description. Yet the FBI presumably can't bring itself to investigate David Rockefeller as a potential Soviet agent, but if Joe Smith of Hoboken, New Jersey were lunching weekly with the KGB, you can be sure the FBI would be on his tail. So these elitists from the secret mystery school, Skull and Bones, could meet with the KGB, but you and I couldn't. Our domestic U.S. Marxists find it absolutely inconceivable that capitalists would support communism. So most people wouldn't believe this. All right. Look at known verifiable historical facts with a mindset. So Scotland Yard and the FBI, I can't believe this stuff. They convince themselves that they have the explanation of a problem even before the problem presents itself. The key to modern history is in these facts. The elitists have close working relationships with both the Marxists, the communists, and the Nazis. The only questions are who and why. On the other hand, national security alone demands that we face these unwelcome relations before any more damage is done to our way of life. So, a curious thought is in my mind to remind myself, when was this book published? Because we've all seen 1986. So they had no idea 911 was coming, or so much more. In this memorandum, we will present the concept that world history, certainly since 1917, reflects deliberate, created conflict with the objective of bringing about a synthesis, a new world order. Now, we all know about the argument of the Holocaust in Germany, the Holocaust deniers, killing of Jews. Some say 2 million, 6 million, whatever. In my opinion, it was a war. What did they do in the United States? They rounded up all the Japanese and put them in the prison camps. World War II. So in Germany, they were rounding up dissidents and other unwanted, or people they were rounding up for slaves in factories. There you go. The state is God, the people are slaves. So in my opinion, it wasn't just Jews. There were a lot of people. And they were using them as free labor for their missile factories, bomb factories, plane factories, etc. And a lot of Jews did get killed and died. And the gas chambers were the same thing they use them for in the United States today. Cremation with dead bodies to prevent diseases. Is that plausible? I'm not trying to have that argument. But this part of the argument I will have. Prior to this World War II, so-called Holocaust, was World War I. We're at the end of World War I. At the end of World War I, Russia had been weakened. And that's when the New York Jewish folks, the Illuminati banksters, elitists, ruling the world, secret mystery school of Babylon, skull and bones, Freemasons, whatever, Zionists, Jesuits, even the Vatican, sent in the Bolshevik Jewish people into Russia and subsequently killed, admitted in Israel's popular newspaper that 25 million Christians and other good people were killed. 25 million. There are documents that I have that says it went up to 100 million. Christians, and they destroyed all the Christian churches, not the Jewish temples. And the Bolshevik Jews were Jewish people. So you have 100 million people killed here right after World War I, when the New York Jewish-sponsored invasion, sending these people, even by train, to Russia to abduct the Tsar and his family, take them out into the country, brought them into a room for a group photograph where they machined and gunned them all to death, proceeded over the next 10 to 15 years to kill 100 million Christians and other good people. I said other good people, not just Christians. Not the Jewish people. So that's 100 million. But then in World War II, they said 6 million Jews were killed. And I think the story is largely fabricated and distorted. Were there Jews who were arrested and put in slave labor camps and killed and all that? Of course there were. And in World War I, prior to World War I, the Jewish people were persecuted and prosecuted in Russia and were fleeing Russia prior to World War I. And Germany was welcoming them, and they had great opportunities and were establishing themselves, these Jewish people who were fleeing from Russia, quite well in Germany. And many of the Jewish people felt that finally they had found their motherland. World War I now. But anyways, there was an ulterior aim, an ulterior goal, a mission that the elitists had, from Rothschilds down, Theodore Herschel, Adam Wostoff, all these people. And that was to take over the Palestinians' land in the Middle East. Because it's all biblical prophecy, it is the land of the ancients, the pyramids and the Sphinx, and a lot of monuments. So they betrayed Germany. In New York, they sent a message over there that they had made a deal with London, with Mr. Balfour, that if these Rothschilds, Rockefeller, and other New York Jewish folks gave money to Britain, who was losing the war with Germany, because Germany had all those high-tech submarines, so you couldn't get any food to England, Britain, that if the Rothschilds gave Britain the money and brought the USA into World War I, because they controlled President Woodrow Wilson, was a pre-planned thing, by the way, putting President Woodrow Wilson into power. They said they were going to put a person they controlled in the presidency of the United States. So in exchange for turning the tide for Britain to win the war, with the USA troops and money and the Rothschilds' money that the Britons would support, annexing the Palestinians' land for the creation of the State of Israel. That was over 100 years ago that Theodore Herschel wrote the book, The State of Israel, at the behest of the Rothschilds. 1776, Adam Wostoff created the United Nations, not the United Nations, the Illuminati, at the behest of the Rothschilds. So there's a lot of this death head, secret mystery school of Babylon information out there about what's the real truth. Alright, back to my little story here in the book. In this memorandum, we will present the concept that world history, certainly since about 1917, reflects deliberate created conflict with the objective of bringing about a synthesis, a new world order. The operation actually began before 1917. In later volumes, we will explore the Spanish-American War, the Anglo-Boer War in 1899. The first was created by the order, i.e. the U.S. elite, and the second by the group, that would be the British version of the Skull and Bones, i.e. the British elite, with some U.S. assistance. We might aptly term the First and Second Hegelian Wars. But this is another story. In this volume, we are limited to the rise of Hitler in Germany and the rise of the Marxist state in the Soviet Union. The clash between these two powers, or the political systems they represent, was a major source for World War II. After World War II, the world stage was changed. After 1945, it became the Soviet Union on one side versus the United States on the other. So they would have all we, the people, to believe. Meanwhile, they controlled our country, the Federal Reserve, and were able to fight this Cold War, i.e. start taking over the rest of the world and spending billions and trillions of our dollars for this venture in the disguised term, the Cold War. The first dialectic clash led to the formation of the United Nations, an elementary step on the road to world government. The second dialectic clash led to the Trilateral Commission, i.e. regional groupings, and more subtly to efforts for a merger of the United States and the Soviet Union. Do they want a merger of the United States and the Soviet Union? And it is becoming increasingly clear that is what they are doing. even as they would have us believe that Donald Trump is such a hero, but apparently is a high priest in the Mystery School of Babylon society, and Hillary is a witch in the Illuminati High Mystery School of Babylon society. They don't tell you that in the nightly news. But if you go look it up, you might find out it's true. We are now going to demonstrate how the order created and developed two global arms needed for Hegelian conflict. Since 1917, the operational vehicles for this global battle have been the Guarantee Trust Company of New York, the same firm cited in the 1919 Scotland Yard report, and two Brown Brothers Harriman, private bankers of New York. Before 1933, Brown Brothers Harriman consisted of two firms, W.A. Harriman Company and Brown Brothers. Numerous members of the Skull and Bones, George Bush's fraternity, have been in both firms. But one individual stands out above all others as the key to the operations of the order. W. Averill Harriman, the Order 13. So here's a little chart showing the Skull and Bones and the groups they use to create the synthesis and the anti-synthesis, thesis and antithesis to bring about a synthesis. I noticed when I held this chart up, I didn't hold it up clear enough, so let me do it. I noticed I didn't show that chart so well, so I'll read it. Creation of global conflict, the operational vehicles. The thesis is Marxist Russia, Guarantee Trust Company, Brown Brothers Harriman, and Ruscombank, I guess a Russian bank. Joint Guarantee Trust Soviet Operation 1922. So that would be the thesis. The antithesis, this is directional money and control coming from the Skull and Bones. Guarantee Trust Company, Union Banking Corp, Harriman and Nazi interest. So the Skull and Bones were George Bush Jr. and Sr. and John Kerry and many others. One of the many numerous Mystery School of Babylon institutions, lodges, temples, secret organizations. So the Skull and Bones was financing, controlling what went on with Russia and what went on with Germany. And then down to the thesis, Marxist Russia, was the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, construction and subsidy of the Soviet Union, construction and subsidy of the Soviet Union from 1920 to 1984. And on the antithesis, 1933, Hitler's ascension to power, construction and subsidy of National Socialism. The synthesis, which was post-World War II, was the United Nations as a first step to a new world order. So moving on, so W. Averill Harriman, Order 13. In official Harriman biographies, however, there is no mention of the Order, Skull and Bones, or the Russell Trust. Like other initiatives, Harriman has carefully expunged membership from the public record. So what does Hillary belong to? What does Donald Trump belong to? Any of these secret mystery school of organizations? Was Larry Nichols correct when he told Alex Jones or Lisa Haven on the TV, YouTube videos that he was the handler for the Clintons and did many things to help them? And a lot of people died who opposed them. What's the truth? So Edward Harriman started work at 14 while with little education. but married Mary Averell, daughter of a New York banker and railroad president. At 22, Harriman bought a seat on the New York Stock Exchange and got lucky or smart with the Union Pacific after the crash of 1893. So they were having financial crashes in 1893, probably planned and orchestrated, and allowed Edward Harriman to scoop up the Union Pacific train lines. Stuff's been going on a long time. This source cites Harriman as an example of how a road may be drained of its resources for the benefit of insiders. Because it's wreckable, all right, Wall Street. So Wall Street can wreck everything. If we are having a looming stock market crash again, they will probably be prepared to buy everything up until the American people have nothing left. We the people. Moving on, Harriman printed securities with a nominal value of $80 million to expand capitalization of his railroads. So he created some bonds worth $80 million. On the other hand, Harriman neglected to acquire improvements and property for more than $18 million. In other words, $60 million of the securities was water, mostly sold through Coombe, Loeb and Company, his backers and bankers. The $60 million went into Harriman's pocket. So I found a nice little tricky way to rip off the system and put $60 million in his pocket. These are the people from the Skull and Bones who wind up in powerful places throughout our governments, corporations, industrial complex, educational associations, historic associations, medical associations, and so much more. We're all being deceived. Alright, moving on. Page 128. In 1904, ICC report stated, it was admitted by Mr. Harriman that there was about $60 million of stock and liabilities issued, against which no property had been acquired, and this is undoubtedly an accurate estimate. In brief, Mr. Edward Harriman was apparently a thief, a crook, and a felon, because fraudulent conversion of $60 million is a felon. Harriman stayed out of jail by judicious expenditures to politicians and political parties. I guess donating to politicians and political parties gets you some special benefits. So much for the New World Order working out for we the people. Imagine when they do disarm us. Biographer George Keenan relates how Harriman responded to President Theodore Roosevelt's 1904 plea for $250,000 for the Republican National Committee. President Theodore Roosevelt, 1904. These funds were turned over to the committee by Harriman's friend and attorney, Judge Robert Scott Leavitt. Robert Abercrombie Leavitt, the Order 18, so Robert Abercrombie Leavitt was in the Skull and Bones, went to Yale with two Harriman boys, Roland and Averell, and was initiated into the order. Harriman, and a key force to have President Harry Truman recall Douglas MacArthur from Korea. By itself, the Leavitt family is incidental. When we link it to the Harriman family, we have an example of how these families help each other along the way for a common objective. In any event, $250,000 hardly changed Theodore Roosevelt's view of Harriman. 2 years after the gift, Roosevelt wrote Senator Sherman and described Harriman as a man of deep-seated corruption, an undesirable citizen, and an enemy to the Republic. Personally, I think that describes a lot of these people coming from the Skull and Bones, the Death Head. and other secret mystery school Lucifer worshipping associations, temples, and lodges, and organizations all over the planet. They are no friend to we the people. So another little chart here. The Harriman family and its satellites. Bush family, Brown, Ames, Woolley, James, Lovett, and the Harriman right in the center. So Antony Sutton has done a great job at documenting all the names, connections to support his theory about all these people being in cahoots with each other. (1934), Special Assistant Administrator to Roosevelt. So this Harriman guy was Averell Harriman. 1941, Minister to Great Britain. 1941, Ambassador to the Soviet Union. 1946, Ambassador to Great Britain. 1946, Secretary of Commerce. 1948, U.S. Representative to the ECA in Europe. 1950, Special Assistant to President Truman. 1951, U.S. Representative at NATO defense meetings. 1955, Governor of the State of New York. 1961, Ambassador at Large. 1961, Assistant Secretary of State for the Far East. 1963, Assistant Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. 1968, U.S. Representative at Paris, peace talks in Vietnam. 1983, visits Yuri Andropov in Moscow. With this lengthy global experience, one might suspect that Harriman has developed a deep knowledge, understanding, and perception of the world, but in fact his writings suggest he is either rather stupid or one of the most deceptive men ever to walk the face of the earth. So I wonder how George Bush Jr. got to be a governor of a state while his brother's a governor to another state. Then he gets to be president. So I guess if you are a part of these elitists, you get put in special places. Where did Obama come from? Out of nowhere. Promoting change when there has been no change. Just saying. Moving on. Therefore, in the early 20s, my firm participated in credits to finance trade with Russia. This is from written by Averell Harriman. We found, as others did, that the new government was most meticulous in meeting its financial commitments. So Averell Harriman said Russia was to be depended on. But the truth is, in fact, the Soviets expropriated the concessions of the 1920s, including Harriman's. So in fact, the Russians just seized everything, usually without reimbursement. Harriman was double-crossed by the Soviets in his Georgia Manganese concession, then persuaded to take $3 million in Soviet bonds as compensation. This Soviet compensation, in effect, put Harriman in a position of making the first U.S. loan to Russia, breaching United States law against such loans. Mr. Harriman said that they expect to drop about $3 million, which they would charge off as experience. On the Russian side, one of the most troublesome myths is that America is run by a ruling circle made up by Wall Streeters and industrialists who have an interest in continuing the Cold War and the arms race to prop up the capitalist economy. Unfortunately, the Russians are largely right on the political aspects of this one. Harriman not only confirms Russian paranoia, i.e. the capitalist can't be trusted to tell the truth, but also deceives the American reading audience in Look magazine that they do. In fact, have a participation in running political affairs. So a lot of us are aware that like the Disney World threatened to boycott Georgia, the state, if the governor signs that bill to allow people of religion to not do things like gay weddings or gay marriages. I mean, it's pretty clear in the Bible that a man should not lay with another man. Adultery is the 7th commandment, do not commit adultery. Right below murder and right above stealing. So no wonder they want to destroy the Bible. Stalin paid tribute to the assistance rendered by the United States to the Soviet industry before and during the war. So here the USA banksters, the crooks that are robbing us today, were supporting the Russians and the Germans at the same time. He said that about 2/3 of all the large industrial enterprises in the Soviet Union had been built with the United States' help or technical assistance. In brief, Harriman knew firsthand, back in 1944, at least that the West had built the Soviet Union. Now examine Harriman's official biography with its string of appointments relating to NATO, Mutual Security Agency, State Department, Foreign Policy, and so on. In these posts, Harriman actually pushed for a military buildup of the United States. But if the Soviet Union was seen to be the enemy in 1947, we had no need to build a massive defense. What we should have done was cut off technology. There was no Soviet technology, and Harriman knew that there was no Soviet technology. So instead of having a Cold War, we didn't even have to bother. We just needed to stop sending Russia high technologies. Furthermore, Harriman had been on the forefront of the cry for more trade with the Soviet Union. And trade is the transfer vehicle for technology. In other words, Harriman had been pushing two conflicting policies simultaneously. Skull and bones. A buildup of Soviet power by export of our technology. B, a Western defense against the power. Isn't this the Hegelian dialectic? The thesis versus the antithesis. Then conflict, which leads to a new synthesis. In the following memoranda, we will show how Harriman and his fellows in the Brotherhood of Power went about this program to conflict creation. So this whole system they're setting up right now with China, Russia, Iran, Israel, United States, Brazil, Canada, France, England, all over the Middle East, parts of Africa, Europe. They want to bring about a World War III. One memorable occasion was back in 1971 when author Edward Wintrow was at a dinner party with Harriman when Harriman trotted out his well-worn line, "I was the first to warn of Soviet danger." Wintrow stopped him cold. In research for a book, Wintrow had found documents incriminating Harriman in the National Archives. In particular, Wintrow cited a state document telegram dated February 12, 1944, from Harriman to Roosevelt. Said Wintrow, "You told Roosevelt that you were convinced that the Soviets did not want to introduce a communist government into Poland." So up jumped 79-year-old Harriman from the dinner table and waved his fist at the 70-year-old Wintrow, shouted Harriman, "If you print anything like that in your book, I'll break your jaw." Guarantee Trust was founded in 1864 in New York. Over the next 100 years, the banking firm expanded rapidly by absorbing other banks and trust companies. Alright, I'm going to try to wrap up this one on this book, this video. And I believe we'll be having another part 5 on this book. If you find the information interesting, thumbs up. And if you want to donate to my research, there's a link to PayPal in the comment section. Money makes the world go round. So finishing up this book, the original capital for Guarantee Trust came from the Whitney, Rockefeller, Harriman, and Vanderbilt families. Oh my. All represented in the Skull and Bones. Oh my. And on the board of Guarantee Trust by family members throughout the period we are discussing. Oh my. Harry Payne Whitley, Order 94, inherited 2 Standard Oil fortunes from the Payne and Whitney families. The Order 63, Alfred Vanderbilt, the Order 99, represented the Vanderbilt family until he drowned at sea in the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915. The power of the order is reflected in a bizarre incident as Alfred Vanderbilt boarded the Lusitania in New York on its fateful voyage. A telegram warning Vanderbilt not to sail was delivered to the Lusitania before it sailed, but it never reached Vanderbilt. So the Lusitania was sunk in 1915, hence bringing America into World War I, and Vanderbilt was sent a warning not to get on the ship. Strangely enough, in 911, people were warned not to be at work that day, and one firm, Jewish firm, Israeli firm, had apparently abandoned a $50,000 lease and vacated the premises. And a lot of people are aware that some people shorted some stocks on American Airlines, I believe. And so many other coincidences to prove what this book is saying. But all these things are planned. In brief, a member of the order was vice president and then president of Guarantee Trust Company in the years 1915 to 1928. 2 years which record the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Hitler to power in Germany. One last thing I highlighted, Percy Rockefeller, the Order 00. Percy Rockefeller, born in 1878, was the son of William D. Rockefeller, brother of John D. Rockefeller, and inherited part of Standard Oil fortune. Percy was the director of Guarantee Trust in the 1915 to the 1930 period. How the order relates to Guarantee Trust and Company, Brown Brothers Harriman. So they got a lot of names: Henry Davidson, Daniel Davidson, Percy Rockefeller, Harriman, Whitney, Crane, Stanley, Cross, Prescott Bush, George Bush's daddy's daddy, John Madden. So thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.